Welcome to Talking Giants player profiles and projections. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, Justin Pennick, brought to you by Captain Morgan. And today, we start off the final week of PPPs with Aaron Stinnie, the Giants guard, 6'3", 312 pounds, 30 years old. Justin, he's 30 years old, had started one regular season game up until last year where he started 10, even though he started the last three playoff games in the Bucs Super Bowl run. So there's some folklore there from him in Tampa, even though he didn't really play well in that stretch. This is the first guy up off the bench for the Giants' interior offensive line. I think no matter who goes down, even if it's JMS, Aaron Stinnie's getting put in the lineup somewhere.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because the Giants don't really have a backup center, but also I think it's because that they like Aaron Stinnie. There was a certain point where, based on Evan Neal's injury diagnosis, and then also the fact that Greg Van Roten wasn't here, that there was a certain point that Aaron Stinnie was going to be a Giant starter, that he was going to be one of the starters that we have at guard. I am glad that he is not a starter at guard, but I do view him as a plus backup, and I'm glad that the Giants brought him in on this deal.
Yeah, it's a minimum contract, so it's nothing special. Now, again, he's a player that did struggle last year for the Tampa Bay Bucs. You know, he gave up 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, and 25 pressures in 11 starts last year. And his pass blocking efficiency was ranked 63rd out of 85 guards. So essentially you had, the 64 starting guards. He was 63rd out of the 85. So we haven't seen a lot of Stinnie in a Giants uniform, and maybe he's improved. But he is a negative in the passing game. Like, if he goes in, and obviously this makes sense because he's a backup, he is their worst pass blocking starter right then. He's one, I think he's got slow feet. And my biggest worry is that he consistently gets beat in the half-man game. And, I did a film breakdown on Stinnie if you want to go check out to see exactly what I'm talking about. But it's basically like when you're a guard, you want to get just head-to-head. You want your nose to be directly across from the other player's nose. And too often guys are able to get to his shoulder and beat him, like that. And that's why he, gave up so many pressures in those 11 starts and the 2 sacks. Doesn't work well super laterally. So you don't have like these quick initial losses, but it's just consistently where guys are able to get, up the seams on him. And it'll be interesting if he's got a guy like Thomas next to him, may look a lot better. Eleanor, you may see the same exact struggles, but he was a net negative in the passing game for the Bucs last year as a starter.
Yeah, and Bobby, I think that's a good point to talk about. He doesn't lose quick, where he was one of 13 guards last year to allow 2 QB hits or less, and one of 25 guards last year to allow 2 sacks or less when you make it, a certain, 50% of however many qualified snaps that PFF has up there. So but the overall efficiency is not good. Like, that's where, the overall efficiency, like you mentioned, is down. If there's 60, 70 guards that qualified, he's in the 50s of that. So the losses aren't quick initially. And why I think that is that, Bobby, I think I love his hands. I think he kind of puts his hands in a good spot. I think he shoots at his hands pretty quick, but his feet are just so late to the party to getting to where his hands and his body want to go. And that's where he loses that half-man relationship where, man, if he was just slightly more athletic and had like a little bit better lateral movement, I think you're talking about a solid offensive lineman. But because he doesn't have that lateral movement and his feet doesn't match where his hands are and his body want to go, that's where you're talking about where he will lose a play and a rep eventually.
Yeah, he's a strong player too, but like if you just don't want to listen to O-line jargon, like if you want to think of like what he is the level of player, well, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decided that they would go spend some money, not a ton of money, but money on Ben Bredeson to replace Aaron Stinnie, and would, and they also have, what was the guy at Notre, Robert Hainsey on the bench for them. I think one of their guards got hurt. But like Ben Bredeson was viewed as a replacement to them. Now, I personally would have rather the Giants kept Ben Bredeson. Even if they went and signed Aaron Stinnie too, I think they should have went and kept Ben Bredeson for that $3 million. But that's the level of play you're getting. And again, he's started 12 regular season games at 30 years old you want to include playoffs, then he's had 16 starts in his entire career at 30 years old. Now in the run game, he is strong once he gets connected, right? He can move some guys, he can work combos well. But don't ask him to do anything super athletic because he gets off the ball kind of slow. He struggles to cross face in the run game if you're trying to run some outside zone stuff or have him on a reach block on the backside. But if you're trying to run right at those linebackers, Stinnie is good because he's, like you mentioned, just like in the pass protection, his hands do land well. He brings good pop. He can sustain well. It's just, again, it's basically the same talking points as his pass protection. There's just a lack of athleticism there.
Yeah. Upper body good, upper body strong, lower half, I think he's strong, but I think you just want more movement. You want more quickness, and it's just not there. So that's why, I think I view him as a plus backup. Right?
So backup, again, the backup offensive line conversation is always funny because there's again, like I think like backup QB, there's not even a lot of ton of great starters out there. Yeah, so there's not very many good backup offensive linemen. But I do think there's better backups in the NFL. And it would have been nice to have someone drafted here to, maybe make him the second backup because we're two injuries away from total disaster. But here's the thing is,
whatever happened to the 67th overall pick of the 2022 draft? Wasn't he a guard at one point? Anyway.
Didn't you watch the UNC film? We're going to see Aaron Stinnie at some point this year.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
You have three interior, positions that one of those guys get hurt. Aaron Stinnie goes in, and he is starting. Now, hopefully, we don't see much from him. And those guys can stay healthy, but he is going. We're going to see him at some point this year, and we're going to be relying on him. Can he? The question is, can he be 42nd out of 85 guards in pass blocking efficiency? And like you mentioned, with the sack and QB hit numbers actually weren't bad for guards, but the pressure numbers were. Can you do that while having, like I said, being 42nd or 43rd? Then I'm happy with it. If he's 63rd out of 85 and he's our first guy up off the bench, and considering that we had to sign Greg Van Roten in training camp, then I'm not if he plays like he did last year, I'm not happy with him being the first guy up.
I think you got to live with it, though, because that's just kind of where we're at.
Sure. I mean, that is their roster. Why don't you talk to us about something?
I'll talk to you about something. This PPP is brought to you by Captain Morgan. Did you know that they're the official spiced rum sponsor of the NFL? Did you know that Captain Morgan is going to be with us every single step through this year? So I can't help but appreciate Captain Morgan for everything that they're doing. And it's perfect for game day. We're not just talking about it because Captain Morgan wants us to. We're talking about it because Captain Morgan is actually going to make your game day experience, or really any kind of life experience that you got, better, delicious, crisp, perfect for game day with friends. Spice it up, especially if you're hanging out with friends, if you're hanging out with anybody. Get Captain Morgan to spice up your occasion. Visit CaptainMorgan.com to find Captain near you. Please drink responsibly. Captain Morgan Original Spice Rum, 35% alcohol by volume. Captain Morgan Rum Company in New York, New York. Bobby Skinner, you'll be glad you did.
You'll be glad you did. Now let's talk about Cor'Dale Flott, Justin. 6'2", 175 pounds, 23 years old. The 2022 third-round pick out of LSU. Justin, he has been the Michael Scott snip, snap, back and forth thing. In college, he played his large majority in the slot. As a rookie in the NFL, played exclusively outside cornerback. Year 2, he played exclusively in the slot. And year 3, Justin, guess what? He is going back to the outside. He's projected to be the Giants' cornerback too. So there's a lot of Flott talk, right? He was, training camp. He was probably the most negatively discussed player on the Giants. And cornerback 2 is a need for the Giants. Last year, in a Wink Martindale scheme, I thought he actually did all right. His stats, advanced stats, 40 completions on 62 attempts, 64.5% completion rate, 452 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception, 3 pass breakups. That's a guy who started basically every game. His man versus zone stats, though.
Oh, it's mind-boggling.
They're two totally different players.
It's crazy.
They are two totally different players. And I understand the outside corner in a zone scheme is more like man than the nickel corner, right? And that's where those stats mean a lot, which again, Cor'Dale Flott played nickel, so they mean a lot. But he is two different players. And I worry about him, how he's going to be able to handle like size on the outside, and having to play smart in zone coverage. Because there was nobody who had a higher snap share of man coverage in the NFL than him. Like
nobody.
Like he had the most, the highest snap share of man coverage in the NFL last year.
Yeah. Now, granted, Nick McLeod and Deontay Banks were not far behind because that was just Wink Martindale's scheme.
Right. But him more so.
Right. Right. But I guess it is, Bobby.
The difference, though, is the stats in the man versus the zone versus compared to those other guys.
I will say it is encouraging that 47% of Cor'Dale Flott's coverage snaps last year were in man coverage, which did lead the NFL. And his numbers, let's see if we have the same numbers. 9 catches on 23 attempts, 39.1% completion rate, 112 yards allowed, and a 69.5 passer rating allowed. I mean, so I will say the curious case of Cor'Dale Flott, where we can make plays against like Terry McLaurin and Tyreek Hill, but for some reason we can never do enough to guarantee ourselves a spot to stay in the lineup on a week in, week out basis. We can, every single year, we have a training camp that the team is begging us. The Giants are begging Cor'Dale Flott to take over, and he just can't. So, I mean, I guess these man coverage stats are encouraging, but then the zone numbers, 24 catches allowed, 28 attempts, 221 yards on a 99.6 passer rating. That's crazy, especially for somebody who barely plays zone coverage.
Yeah, so out of 87 cornerbacks last year, and this I'll go his man versus zone. Completion rate, 10th in man, 83rd in zone. Again, out of 87. Forcing completion rate, 46th to 73rd. Snaps per reception allowed, 11th to 87th, dead last. And then snaps per target, 27th to 87th, dead last again. And it shows up on film, right? Like before I ever even saw these statistics, Justin, a big theme of the film reviews last year is like when they did run zone coverage, the man was just lost to where I would have to send it to defensive coaches. Like, what is he doing? Is this a defense I don't know? Like, what is Cor'Dale Flott? He's like, they're telling me, I'm kind of lost. I don't know what that is. I don't know why he's doing that. Just continue, like, and you can't have a guy starting like that in a non Brian Flores, Wink Martindale scheme, right, and asking him, because again, 85% completion percentage allowed in zone coverage, right, compared to 39% in man coverage. Like, and man coverage, he does have man coverage traits, right? Like, he's able to run, he's athletic, he can move really well. He fights back to get that inside leverage.
Yeah. I even think he can make a play on the football, and he can make a tackle after the catch too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think he can do it. We've seen flashes of it, and that's the frustrating part of the Cor'Dale Flott experience is that you see, like I keep going back to that play, that crossing pattern where Tyreek Hill. Now, granted, I don't think Tyreek Hill's running fully full speed, but he's one of the first reads that Tua's going to, and Cor'Dale Flott makes a nice play on the football, and he gets his hand in there, and you see these flashes of really good Cor'Dale Flott stuff, and then for whatever reason, he can't stay consistent with it, or even forget staying consistent with it on the field. He can't stay on the field because the coaching staff doesn't trust to keep him on the field.
Yeah, he just makes a ton of mental mistakes. So, I mean, let's talk about because he's moving back to the outside. What do you think about that decision?
I think it's fine, right? Like,
now again,
especially the nickel in this Shane Bowen defense, Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong. We were talking with Nate Tice. It seems like the nickel in this particular defense, I like Drew Phillips as a blitzer more, and I like Drew Phillips as a more physical presence, right? Cor'Dale Flott is still very small, he gets bullied in the run game.
That's a huge part of why he's not playing nickel anymore. He cannot handle He cannot handle the run duties that a nickel corner needs to handle.
But also, correct me if I'm wrong, the nickel is also going to be asked to do numerous different things in terms of maybe pre-snap disguising something into post-snap. You got to be smart, and I just don't think Cor'Dale Flott can do that in zone coverage from the nickel spot, right?
No, I mean, wasn't asked to do it a ton, and he just made mental mistake after mental mistake. Like a lot. Like it was an alarmingly amount of mental mistakes. And again, this was a guy who wasn't asked to do it a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and now he would be asked to do it, you know, like when we talk about like, oh, well, Shane Bone's going to run more zone coverage than Wink Martindale, who ran, the most man coverage in the NFL. That mostly affects the nickel corners because man coverage or zone coverage for the outside corners, a lot of times you're playing the sideline, right? Which turns into man coverage on almost all of the routes, right? Essentially every route that turns into man coverage, at least for the first, 2.5 seconds of the play. For nickel, it's not. You're playing the flats. You're dropping back vertical. You're just doing a lot more. You have to key in on the run game way more. You're just being asked to do a lot more, and Flott just hasn't shown that he's able to do all of those things. Even though if we just said, "Hey, where do I trust him to play man coverage more?" It's the slot, but that's just you can't start down in, down out. So, but right now he is their starter on the outside, and he's dealing with injury. Like he's never through all the camp practices we were at.
You keep saying that, and I don't know if he is.
Well, I'm just saying they had not given anybody an opportunity there until he got injured.
I guess that's true.
Until he got injured, no one else got an opportunity out there. And again, they might put Nick McLeod. They probably are going to add somebody at the end of this week. But right now, it seems like he's that, and they know it's an issue, right? We saw Hard Knocks where they, desperately they looked like they wanted to die when they couldn't get Kamari Lassiter or Kool-Aid McKinstry in the second round.
80. This is the 81st pick of the 2022 NFL draft.
So this is year 3 for Flott, and it feels like he's kind of just a placeholder for them to upgrade this spot.
Great, fantastic. You want your favorite stat? Now that I have discovered it, but I need to look into it more to see what's good and what's bad and what it means. Completion rate over expected. Good news. Cor'Dale Flott was best out of all corners last year on the Giants with minus 7.4% completion rate over expected. And Deonte Banks wasn't far behind at minus 7.2%.
I hate that stat because there's just no way you can measure that by tracking devices.
I think you can.
We'll see. So Cor'Dale Flott was the best corner on the Giants last year?
In that specific stat, yes, he was.
Who was the best corner? Rank the corners on the Giants last year.
According to Next Gen, can't do that.
Okay. All right, that's an episode. We will see you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Big Blue.